One of the most ambitious projects in history, the International Space Station, is marking a decade of manned operations. The ISS has been an epic milestone for space exploration as it served as the longest home away from home and been visited by some 200 people. RT's Igor Ogorodnev takes us back to the station's early days.
They set off for one of the most important expeditions in the history of space exploration. On November 2nd, 2000, Expedition 1 was to dock with the International Space Station and become its first permanent crew. They didn't know what to expect.
When we started training for the ISS, the station itself did not exist. There were no manuals. There were no exercise machines.
The docking was a success, but now the crew had to activate the station. Assembled separately in Russia and the US, the first time the ISS components fitted together was in space.
The first 2 weeks on there were extremely stressful. If we failed, we'd have had to return to Earth and abandon the station. It would never have been constructed as planned.
A lot of the equipment did not work as planned. In contact with Earth, we had to try and fix it on the spot.
The equipment was turned on, but there was nowhere to live. The two Russian cosmonauts had already completed long missions on the Mir, the older Russian orbital station.
On the Mir, it was old analog technology, switches and stuff. The ISS was clean and shiny, but it was very hard living there. All the space was taken up by equipment that would have to be installed. We could barely squeeze past each other and slept on the floor. But we knew it was our job, and also how often do you get to go into space?
In the years after Expedition 1, the station expanded rapidly. New modules were added. The ISS received 200 visitors. I asked the current crew what has changed since Expedition 1.
These days, the station is so huge, like an apartment block. We don't get to see each other for long periods of time.
It's okay, but it's getting a bit worn down now. I wish they would renovate some of it.
Despite what's been achieved in a decade, the overall usefulness of the ISS is still being debated.
This station has cost the taxpayer $100 billion, and that's just absurd. It's too much, but it's there.
All the Expedition 1 members have now retired from space travel, but still believe what they did was worthwhile.
We laid the foundation for the International Space Station and for the future of space research.
And with the ISS lifespan already extended to 2020, the fruits of Expedition 1 are still being born. Whatever its limitations and budget overruns, the ISS is important. At a time where it no longer seemed like everything was possible in space and there were no longer the Cold War budgets to fund it all, the ISS still proves that space research can be right at the edge of human endeavour. Igor Ogorodnev, RT, Moscow.
A former cosmonaut from Russia's Mir space station believes it was that program which laid the foundations for the ISS. Mir was the first constantly inhabited station in orbit and carried out thousands of experiments. It was decommissioned in 2001 and sent to a fiery grave, burning up in the Earth's atmosphere.
The modules that are now used on the ISS are the same ones used on Mir. Of course, they are more technologically advanced. Better equipment is used, including digital. But it all started with Mir. That's where it all began. There were long-term cosmic flights with representatives from other countries, including Europe and the US. It was our program. We weren't dependent on anyone. It might be more interesting to be on the International Space Station. There's always an exchange of experience. But when we were on Mir, we could use the equipment as we pleased.